My name is Cait McQuade, and I serve as coordinator of lay-led services here at UCB. Something I love about this congregation is our many different ways, many different options for exploring and expanding our spiritual lives, like a lay-led service, and I'll have more to say about that in a minute. But first, welcome to Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder, and an especially warm welcome to everyone who's visiting us for the first time. If you're joining us online, fill out a visitor form, please, and the link the link in the description. We'd love to connect with you. To give you some idea of what we're all about here, let me tell you our mission. We say that here we connect bravely, deepen spiritually, embody justice, and always love. What we mean is that this community is inviting you into our shared time together today, but it's also inviting you into a way of life, a way of being in the world that might transform you. We want to grow as individuals and to welcome more people into this community, and we want to help you in your personal mission to make the world and your life better. One of the ways we practice our mission is through lay-led services, and what I mean by that, by lay-led, is that worship services a few times a year are planned and presented by people who are usually sitting out in the pews next to you. Our minister, Reverend David Schwartz, gets a break, or more likely, he's working at something else. And we have the chance to share meaningful parts of our spiritual lives with each other. Anyone is welcome to participate. You don't even need to stand up here and speak to be a part of planning a worship service. You can just join in the conversations that we have about worship and other things that are important to us. In our covenant, we make a promise to each other about how we will be together in community. It is simple, and it is demanding. In person and online, will you join together as one to speak it out loud? We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it. Each week when we gather, we light our chalice, just as 1,000 other congregations do each week around this country. It is a symbol of our Unitarian past, present, and future, and a token of our interconnection. We light this flame to remind us love is the center. As we grow and connect, mature, and deepen, love remains the center. When the light of truth burns all else away, love remains.
Our opening words are from a poem by W.H. Auden. Towards the end of it, the poet describes a specific painting. This one, called Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, which was painted in the 16th century. If you strain, you might see Icarus's legs sticking up from the water in the lower right, just below the ship. The poem, Musée des Beaux-Arts. About suffering, they were never wrong. The old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes place, while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking duly along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not specifically want it to happen. Skating on a pond at the edge of the wood, they never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course, anyhow in a corner, some untidy spot, where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturous horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away, quite leisurely, from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone, as it had, on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to, and sailed calmly on.
Our opening hymn this morning is also based on a painting by Paul Gauguin, the French artist, painted between 1897 and 1898. And the painting itself depicts three groups of women, and they represent the three questions that form the basis of the hymn. So there's a group of women with a newly born child who kind of represent the question, where do we come from? There's a group of women in the middle who represent sort of the daily existence, what are we? And then there's a group of women sort of looking off into the distance, kind of wondering what will come next, where are we going? So we're going to have a little bit of fun with this one. There are 4 different musical ideas. We're going to repeat them all a bunch of times, and then you get to choose your own adventure and do whatever you like. So please rise in body or in spirit, and let's have a little fun. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. One more time. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? One more time. Where do we come from? Where? Sing any part you like. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where
Our commitment to connect bravely means that we are called to be glad with those who rejoice and to weep with those who mourn. Each week, we set aside this time in the service to make visible in ritual the joys and sorrows that are now shaping our lives. Usually, we place stones in the earth to symbolize our joys and cares, taking their place in a larger whole. Today, we will mark what is significant in ink. Silently add a circle to those drawn during the earlier service. Your mark will become part of the larger whole, symbolizing the delights and sorrows that we carry in community. For those meeting in person, I invite you to come forward as you feel so moved, starting with the back half of the room, then folks on the sides, and finally the center section.
Good morning. My name is Sally Hall. And the topic, the reflection I'm going to speak on, I've titled, Does Spending Time with Art Make Us Better People? I have the very good fortune to work in the galleries of the Denver Art Museum. And there's not often a question I get, but a question that is not unusual, and it always surprises me. It's along the lines of one I was asked just a few weeks ago. These paintings aren't originals, are they? It's not the most common question. That honor goes to, how do I get to the other building? And where are the elevators? But it's not an unusual question either. And it's not unusual for my answer, which is some version of yes. Everything you will see in this museum is an original. It's not unusual for that answer to be met with skepticism. More quotes. Well, maybe that's true here, but I heard that in Europe, they keep all the originals in the basement and just show the copies on the walls. Or the second one is, well, if it is an original, what is it doing here? Why isn't it in the Met? I'm describing visitors who are curious enough to come to an art museum and interested enough to ask about what they are seeing, but unsure of what to make of it. Is this real? Is it a print? What does it mean? Does it apply to me? And if it does, how? Why? Why should I spend my time here looking at this? Cafe's downstairs, right? In essence, what is the point of coming to an art museum? And these are basic fundamental questions, not just about art. These are the same kinds of questions that all of us through the centuries as humans have asked as we move through our world. The arts are there to share with us all that has gone on before, what has been learned in the centuries of others asking the same questions. These are the pictures, the sculptures, the embodiment of stories, the struggles, and sometimes the answers that are being held here, sharing what was accomplished, where things soared, or what went wrong, and how that looked. As the New York Times columnist David Brooks puts it, does consuming art, music, literature, and the rest of what we call culture make you a better person? It seems no matter where we are in this journey, there are always questions. How should I lead my life? What can I do when I'm afraid or lonely or lost? Has this ever happened before? And where do I belong? As someone who works in a place that is essentially filled with pictures of stories, I feel I am surrounded by illustrations of every one of these questions. What were little girls like 100 years ago when they went to the seashore? What would it be like to be parents who have to make their living as acrobats on the streets of Paris? And what would it feel like to have to hold your child in your arms after he fell from the tightrope during a performance? and he's dying. What did war look like before Chris Hemsworth? Russell Crowe, John Wayne, Gary Cooper, or Rudolph Valentino made movies about it. And what does war feel like? What would it feel like to be a kid so sick and tired of all your parents' rules that you find a secret boat and you sail away meeting others who want to do what you want to do the way you want to do it? And the last illustration was Henry VIII ever a skinny little kid with a receding chin? Yes, he was. These images can inspire us, motivate us, spark curiosity about other people and other places. They can help us imagine ourselves in a different time and place. The more we imagine, the bigger our own world. The more we step out, the more possibilities we can recognize. The more we can understand, the greater possibility of experiencing empathy, potentially the greater our compassion and our generosity. There's humbleness in learning to look, in approaching a painting or a sculpture with the attitude of, what can this show me? The novelist Frederick Buechner observed that not all the faces Rembrandt painted were remarkable. Some were just average-looking old people. But even the plainest face was so remarkably seen that it forces us to see it remarkably. That is remarkable. It takes practice, but this kind of looking lets us see people in our own lives with more clarity and more generosity. To learn how to look at something, to allow ourselves the time, to spend the time, to see more deeply is empowering. Not all art is in museums. A couple of months ago, I was visiting my two sons who both live in Berlin, Germany. One son is working on his PhD thesis about World War I, so he met me in France. We spent several days touring the battlefields, the trenches, and the cemeteries of that terrible war. As you can imagine, what we saw was incredibly moving. Later, my other son and I visited the Berlin Wall and the memorial that tells that awful story. Lest you think, what a depressing way to spend a vacation. Let me just assure you, we went to some more fun places too. But I bring up these two places because they are not in museums, and they were not ever intended or created to be art. But they each have important stories, and they share them much in the same way that a visit to the museum to view a painting like Picasso's Guernica would be. The other reason I consider these two entities together is because no matter what side of a building's wall the art is on, it tells powerful stories about what has gone before and why, what it looked like, where it happened, and what it looks like now. When we visit to look, to experience its presence, this opens doorways into our own spirit. Museums house the stories of who we are, and the memorial sites of major events embody those lessons our forebears have learned. What they hold is our precious inheritance, all that has been seen, learned, celebrated, and discovered before us, offered to us. We can come to these places to meet our greater selves. we can spend the time and leave enriched. As others have done when it's time to wrap up their thoughts in coherent form, they turn to the poets, and I look to Mary Oliver. Here is her poem, The World I Live In. I have refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? You wouldn't believe what once or twice I have seen. It's just, I'll tell you this. Only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one.
A brief introduction to me, my reflection. My name is Dan Thomas. The writing of my reflection finished off in Boulder Community Hospital yesterday evening. My mother fell and broke her hip this week. I'm dealing with that. But I got to sit in the waiting room and, well, this wasn't the waiting room. She's stable now. But I got to sit and write this, the 5th or 6th or 7th version of this reflection. It's changed a lot. And it even was edited this morning. And it might change as I go. I like to go to exhibits to track the artist's whole development. A piece in isolation doesn't show the journey. The artist tried so many things. 2 days ago, I was talking to my friend Amy about this reflection and what art does for them. Their description of experiencing art as a journey with the artist as they tried things really resonated with me. Art. I have never been an arts person. I wasn't an artsy kid. I wasn't the kid who had the drawing notebook sitting in the corner drawing the whole time. I wasn't the one who succeeded in art class. I was not the kid whose art was being exhibited at the school show. I couldn't even draw the cool S, the S that has like multi-shapes around it. My millennial friends will know what that one is. I was a kid that strived for perfection. I needed to do it perfectly, and I could not do art. I couldn't fit between the lines. I couldn't fit the rubric that they did. I could never draw the nose right, the leg right. I couldn't cut the shapes out correctly. I hated it. A little negative to start out. So I'm going to show some art that I really love. This is art that I've made in the past couple years. There's a couple pins there. There's a shadow photography thing. There's a mandala that I made. I've had a journey a long time to figure out that I'm okay with my art, that it's fine, and I don't need to have judgmental words like, this is good. It's art that I made. Getting back to my journey. By high school, I had given up on art. We only had to do one art class in high school, and I cheated. I cheated at art. I thought I was part of what another friend, because I crowdsourced this reflection. I thought I was part of the 50% of people that didn't get art. Art wasn't for them. As I grew older, I found art that spoke to me a little bit more. I'm so grateful for doing this in community because Sally already posted Picasso's Guernica. It spoke to me about how weird and unsettling art can be, how it can really speak to us, how it can move us, how it can be a reflection on the world. My studies took me to a place where I studied Russian and East European studies in college. I studied ethnic identities, the formation, ethnic conflict. I studied some really heavy and challenging things. And I began to see how art had an effect on society. So much of what I was studying, so much of the world that I interacted with, like the Yale women's table. Now, this isn't a great picture of this, and if you guys are looking for great artwork to be displayed here, this is not the reflection for that one. The Yale women's table is on the center of Yale's campus, and it's a beautiful piece. It has, going from the center of the table in a circle, it has all the years since Yale's founding up until 1993 when the piece was created. And next to those years, it has the number of women who attended Yale College. It's zeros for a long time. And this piece is it's a reflection on a place that was important to me, about progress, about change, about not turning away from certain uncomfortable things. But it's also just fun. I had a number of lunches there, just sitting out with friends, because it's gorgeous. I have hung out with people. I've walked past it. I even walked through the middle of campus as a number of drunken people skinny dipped naked across it as part of an initiation. It's a piece that's part of a community and a part of a grouping. Sometimes the art that drew me in didn't speak to me so much as art. There's such a lovely history to Robert Indiana's love piece. You might have seen this in postcards, in statues, in t-shirts. I even had a t-shirt that I loved in my 20s that said Velo on it, rearranging the letters there, because I was a big cycling fan. But the love sign for me wasn't about it as a piece of art. And by the way, if you look into the history, the commentary on it, oh, it's great. I'm not here to talk about that. The love piece for me was I have dozens of photos of friends, families, girlfriends in front of the sign. It's a piece that was about locations. When I lived in New York, when I lived in Philadelphia. I have pictures of me just taking a photo of the crowd as I left my office on 6th Avenue at 10 p.m. at night during the holidays with a line stretching a block of people looking to take photos there. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit more behind the scenes. As I prepared to reflect on art, I thought, what the heck am I gonna do about this? So I went into my Google Photos and I looked up art. And this was the most recent photo that came up. Some of you might have even seen this. It's called El Cielo y la Tierra by Armando Silva. And this is just a mural in Lafayette. I love this. The colors are awesome. The costumes evoke so much joy. I love the lettering. It's a great piece of art. But for me, this piece is almost more about what's not pictured there. My friend Mary, who we had a long and painful week. Both of us had our own shit going on. And we got together and we went for a walk. And we came upon this mural. And it was such a beautiful marker of the day. It speaks to me of joy, but it also speaks to me of the company and care of a good friend. That she's not here, but she is there. This piece also speaks to me because of the next photo, which you guys do not get to see, because it's just a picture of a statue of a penguin. The statue's fine. But the reason I took this picture of this statue was because my nephew is obsessed with penguins. On his bed, there's probably 20 to 50 stuffies. I don't know if they're still there. The young man is now, he's gonna be turning 17 in January. He got his first call up to varsity football for Erie. But there are still so many penguins in his room. And that art connected me to him. It gave me a sense of connection to something greater. And the artist never knew that. Like, why would their penguin wasn't between me and my nephew. Gosh, this is actually one of my favorite photos everywhere. There is art here, because it's a mosaic. It's of the Oriana Hill Dog Park in Philadelphia, in Northern Liberties. I lived in Philadelphia from 2014 to 2016. It was not a great time in my life. There was a lot of mental health struggles. There were substance abuse issues. A long relationship ended. My ex, she got the dog. I didn't get the dog. Some really bad things happened. And then there's this. This is my niece letting out what I describe as a barbaric yop. It's so beautiful. There's so much joy and love and passion in this photo. And don't worry, I did ask her if I could use it, and she's like, oh, of course you can use it. I look cute. I think I'm starting to get to the crux of my reflection. As my friend Amy said, art is a journey. It's a journey with the artist, with the viewer, and with community. I had a lot of other art I could have shown. They don't necessarily show my journey, but as someone participating with art and making art. Doing this reflection, talking with Sally, with Cait, with friends, it made me feel like I'm not part of that 50% who doesn't get art. As my friend said, experiencing art with someone, with community, changes the relationship not only to the art, but also to that person, to that community. So that art that I made earlier, that is from Second Saturdays at CU Art Museum. Y'all gotta check out CU Art Museum. It's free, and it's very child accessible for all the parents out there. And on Second Saturdays, they do participatory art. I have someone that I call Art Friend. She has a real name, but I call her Art Friend. She's someone who we do little art dates, and we go and we make the art first, and then we go into the gallery. And I think about the way that I get to experience art with her. Yes, we talk about the piece. We talk about the feel. We talk about the space. But we also experience the art together. We're walking around the room. There's other people walking around us. We're experiencing this in a community. I imagine experiencing this space from a recent exhibit with you guys. Experiencing the art together. With you. With Art Friend. With the whole community here. It's a journey. Especially in this time. Whether we're talking winter and all of its challenge, whether we're talking about recent changes in our political system, whether we're just talking about the reality that so many people lived in for so long. I couldn't imagine the journey of art without the idea of making art in community. Making art like this. Art that says, no justice, no peace. We will not go back. Ingrid belongs here. For those of you that are newer, Ingrid was our sanctuary guest who lived in this church for 5 years. This art, whether we call it protest art, whether we call it community art, it's allowed me to see that the journey that I'm on, whether it's of art or as a person, that it's something that I do to live out my values, to live in community. And here, it's funny, I'm like editing on the fly as we go here. This is basically a reflection about me. I'm telling you a journey about me. Art is just a lens that I'm using here. It's been important to participate in community like this because it's allowed me to live out my values. But it's also allowed me to ask the question of, who's in my community? We made this at Pride one year. It just says community is, and hundreds of people, well, hundreds might be an exaggeration, many people wrote down what community meant to them. And it made me think about like who is in my community, but also who's not in my community. Part of the wisdom that I've learned here in this building, and also from other communities I'm involved with, is asking the question of, whose voice don't I hear? Who doesn't either feel a part of my community or who's not a part of my community? And to seek out those voices. All right, somewhat back to the reflection. There was an exhibit a few years ago that I went to over at the Longmont Art Museum. It was called Duality, Contemporary Works by Indigenous Artists. This was an awesome exhibit. There was a really cool, I think it was a painting of Yoda, but in full indigenous regalia. So much fun. See me after the service. There was also a baby carrier with a Godzilla on it. And then there was this piece. This is a piece by Danielle Seawalker. She's a Denver artist whose art has been all around Colorado and the country. Danielle is a Hunkpapa Lakota Sioux artist. And I saw this art in the museum and I was just floored. I'm sure that there's some art commentary about speaking about the piece, but I just sat with it. This has become my favorite piece of art. There's so much going on with it, and it brings me joy, and also it challenges me like art can. I had multiple different endings to this, but I want to end with, yet again, the words from our friend. If I can find them. This piece is called, But I Have Something to Say. And the words that my friend said was, you are imagining yourself in the piece.
need a minute to let that sink in a little bit. It is a really powerful piece. At this point, we had planned to set aside for a prayer and meditation time, and we thought, since this is about visual art especially, that we might do a meditation, a guided meditation on looking at art, because it takes practice to let ourselves let art in, so that we're not always reaching out to it and saying, well, I'm going to take this, and I don't think I need that. And just how to take the time to approach a painting or a sculpture, a mural, wherever you are, and let it come to you. So that's what this is. Just a few minutes to practice looking deeply, because it is something that does take practice. I am basically going to sort of talk us through becoming present, but then I want to have us spend time looking at a picture I took of a painting. This is a Helen Frankenthaler painting. A few months ago, after all the battlefields and cemeteries, I went to Florence, where, of course, you spend a lot of time in the Uffizi and looking at these incredible, medieval, gorgeous pieces of work that tell you stories. It's about this, it's about that. And so after we took all that in, we happened upon an exhibition of Helen Frankenthaler, which was completely different. So just maybe take a moment, take a breath in, and let it go, and let your attention come inward. You're welcome to close your eyes or not, whatever makes you most comfortable. Just take a moment to feel where you are. Sitting on this bench or chair, others all around us. Notice where your hands are, where your feet are on the floor. Take a breath in and let it out. When you are ready to look at this image in front of you, allow time to let it come to you. You don't have to decide what you think about it. No conclusions have to be reached. No decisions need to be made. Let the colors come to you, the movement of the colors, how the light shapes and the dark shapes flow around each other. Maybe there's spots that bother you. Maybe you get used to them. Leonardo da Vinci is quoted as saying, "There's no need to see what you expect. Let yourself see what's there." We'll just take a minute to take a minute. Whenever you are ready, let your awareness return inward. Again, feel the bench you're sitting on, chair, your hands resting. your feet resting on the ground. Take a deep breath in and let it go.
I'm not going to mince words. I am not a theist. When I try to understand something mysterious in the world, I make sense of it without resorting to a god. Failing that, I will settle comfortably with, I guess I'll never know, without ever getting to, hello, God, is that you? There was one time, though, looking at art, when it occurred to me that something divine might be involved. I've now forgotten what prompted that conclusion, forgotten what I was looking at, or exactly where or when. But that sense of God, so unusual for me, I remember. Among the various representations of the divine that I've encountered, one sort fits when draped around that memory. Spirit is not in the I, but between I and thou. This is Martin Buber. Spirit is not in the I, but between I and thou. The notion that God might manifest in our connections with one another, this speaks to my own experience. And for me, to look closely and deeply at art is to connect with another person in a different way from Dan. To feel empathy, sometimes a profound empathy. Art is the medium. Art positions me to see someone, to perceive them in ways unavailable through other media. I have a few examples to show you what I mean. My friend Leah told me about a painting that she had seen at the Getty. There we go. It was created in Rome by an artist named Michael Swiertz in 1654, 375 years ago. Leah described her forceful reaction on seeing it. "That's a person," she said. "That's a person." Across centuries, this image can mediate one person's connection to another unique individual. This is empathy. More often for me, though, the person I connect to when looking at art is the artist. I said that this image mediates connection. We're not perceiving this woman solely through the lens of our own eyes, our own perspectives. The painter perceived certain things about her and represented those things. We are seeing what he noticed to the extent that he could translate his vision to canvas by manipulating tools and materials. Here, we seem to see through the eyes of Edgar Degas in a pastel drawing on paper. You or I might have noticed different things about these two people than he did had we been hanging out with Degas in 1880 in Paris, except that this scene did not happen in real life. Degas often created from memory or borrowed from other images he had made. We are not seeing just through Degas' eyes, we are seeing into his imagination. He once wrote, "One sees as one wants to see. This is false, and this falsity constitutes art." Degas made choices in order to represent something particular that he held in his mind. He chose a long horizontal shape to draw on. He chose to position the two people all the way on the left side of that shape, at the end of an otherwise empty bench. He portrayed one of them in white, the other in black. He chose their poses, elbows on knees, chose not to show their faces, chose a viewpoint above them, looking down. He decided that one person's head would be interrupted by the edge of the picture. Regardless of how carefully an artist makes choices, however, they do not fully control what we see in their pictures. Our responses will depend on our own lived experiences. Have you been a dancer? Have you been an exhausted athlete? Have you smelled the sweat in a rehearsal room or a gym? Have you spent time waiting? Sat on a hard, low bench for a long time? Worn a long-sleeved, ankle-length dress? Have you felt the stiff scratchiness of tulle or heard it brushing against itself when someone moves in it? We have one person's deliberate choices made in pursuit of an image in his mind, and we have another person's vision, yours, seeing through the lens of your lived experience, two viewpoints pressed against each other right at the surface of the painting. If you are moved, if you are intrigued, if you recall some moment in your own life, if you find the tilting bench and the floor a little disorienting, you are responding to another person, to someone who had pastel dust on his fingers 140 years ago. This is empathy. And I think you have touched the spirit between you, between those two people, between Buber's I and thou. So we're seeing pictures on monitors today, not the surfaces, the actual surfaces that artists touched with their tools. That's a big difference. For one thing, today, every image we've seen is the same height. It's the height of the monitor. This is true for those of you watching online also. One of the paintings Sally showed is 25.5 feet wide. The image of war in black, gray, and white by Picasso. The portrait of the young chinless Henry VIII, 15 inches tall. To look at a painting while present in the same space with it, you're not just seeing through the artist's eyes, you're standing in their place, standing where they did when they reached toward it with a brush, or when they stepped back to study their progress. With some art, you can even imagine how they moved to produce the marks they left. This painting is a bit over 2 feet high. A straight slash down the right edge. Some swooping strokes up and to the right in that lower corner. Some of those with a nice wet brush pressed firmly to the canvas, but a couple with a drier brush. Maybe she came in after and dragged some still wet paint further up. You know, when you imagine making a move with your body, your brain fires up in the same places as if you were actually using those muscles. So you could be standing in front of this painting by Judith Godwin, standing where she stood in 1960, imagining the motions of your muscles with your neurons firing in the same place in your brain as they did in hers. Looking at all of these artworks, I experience a kind of transcendence, if what that means is to be outside of oneself, to be face to face with a woman in Rome 350 years ago, to see into Degas' imagination, to muscle my way into Godwin's neurons. In these connections between me and each person, between I and thou, yes, I find there is something of the divine. This month, our entire offering goes to support the mission and ministries of UUCB. As a community, we are entirely self-sustaining through our own donations. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video description. For those gathered here in person, you can also scan the QR code or make a donation as the ushers now pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community and the wider world. Our closing words are from the novelist and essayist E.M. Forster. He addressed the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1949, a year when the Soviet Union built a nuclear bomb to match the two used by the United States on the people of Japan. Forster began by saying, "I believe in art for art's sake." He explained, a work of art, whatever else it may be, is a self-contained entity with a life of its own imposed on it by its creator. It has an internal order. He talked about the general disorder of human experience throughout history. And about the first half of the 20th century, he said, "We were promised a new world order after the First World War through the League of Nations. It did not come, nor have I faith in present promises." He returns to art. A work of art, he said, is a unique product, but why? It is unique not because it is clever or noble or beautiful or enlightened or useful or educational. It may embody any of those qualities. It is unique because it is the only material object in the universe which may possess internal harmony. All others have been pressed into shape from outside, and when their mold is removed, they collapse. The work of art stands up by itself, and nothing else does. Art for art's sake? I should just think so, and more so than ever at the present time. It is the one orderly product which our muddling race has produced. It is the cry of 1,000 sentinels, the echo from 1,000 labyrinths. It is the lighthouse which cannot be hidden. Today, we extinguish this flame to remind us love is the center. As we explore and rest, engage, and heal, love remains the center. When all we can see is cold ashes, love remains. Will you rise in body or in spirit as we close in song?
Before we sing, to my microphone. It's not working. Before we close in song, can we please offer a special thank you to our guest musicians today? Becky Root on the harp, Rob Drugan on the guitar, and the mastermind behind it all, music selection and gathering these people together, Connie Epic on the fiddle. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you feel comfortable joining it, yes, we had another hymn, but we're going to skip it. It's a little bit hard. It's not that important. Let's join hands if you feel comfortable doing so, and we'll close with our congregational response. Hit it. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go in peace.